Philadelphia, Trump National in Philadelphia. And then he's got, Bedminster, White House, New Jersey.
One in Bedminster.
He's got a.
Getting it ready. He went to the Copeland Planning Board. And we wanted to know. Not, yeah.
He's got a in Puerto Rico. He's got a big golf course.
He
and
had a
he's-
golf course.
He had.
I think he's got.
He built some homes. I hear they were gorgeous homes. I never went to see them.
27 courses now or something worldwide. I mean, he's got a good number of courses.
He had a big fight with a farmer in Scotland. That had a house that he wanted to put part of the golf course there, and the guy refused.
I think they just finished, maybe 6 months ago they finished that course. So he's ready to go. He went, with a lot of years, I think it was 4 or 5 years. Everybody here?
Start.
Oh, Tom's not here yet. He'll be here in a few minutes.
He'll be here.
Yeah, 2 minutes. He'll be
He's still got 60 seconds.
60 seconds.
7:31.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Zoning Board of Adjustment meeting for September the 27th, 2017. Will everyone please rise for a salute to the flag?
Under God.
Please be advised that notice of the meeting has been satisfied in accordance with Chapter 231, PL 1975, by advertising in the Home News Tribune, notifying the Sentinel Publishing Company and the Star Ledger, and also posting on the bulletin board and filing with the Borough Clerk. Roll call.
Mr. Green?
Here.
Mr. Kreisman?
Here.
Ms. Cataldo?
Here.
Mr. Kaczynski?
Here.
Mr. Corrigan?
Here.
Mr. Henry?
Here.
Mr. Emma?
Here.
Mr. Esposito?
Here.
Yeah, let's, let me make the. You want to make the, yes. Okay, go ahead. Yeah, Mr. Chairman, just an announcement on, I guess, 3 of the applications for this evening. The first one being 16-13 Shri Bhaktanidhi, 717 Washington Road. I did receive a letter from Jeffrey Kantowitz, and let me just read it into the record. It's dated September 26. Dear Mr. Sachs, we represent Bhaktanidhi in connection with the above matter. This letter will confirm our telephone conversation earlier today that the public hearing in front of the Sayreville Zoning Board of Adjustment on this matter scheduled for tomorrow night, September 27, 2017, will be adjourned to the board's meeting on Wednesday, October 25, 2017 at 7:30 p.m. at the Sayreville Council Chambers, 167 Main Street. Further, this letter will confirm that you will advise the board and the public of this adjournment and that no further public notice need or will be provided. As well, this letter will serve as the applicant's consent to extend to the end of October 2017 the time within which the zoning board must make a decision on this application. Thank you for your courtesies. Very truly yours, Jeffrey Kantowitz. So therefore, this application will not be heard this evening. It will be heard on October 25th, 2017 without further notice. And if anyone in the public is here, you've now been so informed. The second matter which will not be heard tonight is application 17-13 Interstate Outdoor Advertising, 943 Route 9 Old Cheesequake Road, as well as application 17-15 Interstate Outdoor Advertising, Route 9 North and Raritan Street. Actually, I know Mr. Himmelman is here this evening, and Mr. Himmelman, I believe, also had sent me a letter, which I do not have with me this evening, also requesting that these matters both be carried to the October 25th meeting without further notice. So anyone in the public here this evening, for those two applications, you've been so notified. What was that?
Do you want the letter?
No, that's okay.
Okay, we can proceed with the first
Yes.
application. Okay, I'm going to proceed with the first application on the agenda for tonight, and it's 17-19, Dave and Carmine Savilli.
Mr. Chairman, just for the record, I believe at the last meeting, I did review the last meeting, which we did not have, which was the August meeting. This application was scheduled for that evening, and I did review the notices at that particular time. So I'll just state for the record that the board does have jurisdiction for this application this evening, and if someone can make a motion to deem it complete.
Second.
Okay. And as soon as we get the microphone working, I'll swear you in.
I'm pretty loud, I can do it.
Okay, Mr. Billy, if you don't mind going behind the podium, please raise your right hand. Swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Please state your name, spelling your last name and address for the record.
Camille Civilli, Sivilli, 37 Marshall Street in Portland.
Thank you.
Mrs. Savilli, would you tell the board exactly what you want to do at your residence at 37 Marcia?
What we'd like to do is add an additional garage, attaching it to the garage we have, a 13 by 26 garage. Taking the, wall down and making the one car into a two-car garage.
Anyone from the board have any questions in reference to this application?
Will the garage be the same height?
Same height, exactly everything the same. There's line, everything.
John, could you go over what the issues were?
Sure. The proposed addition is 13 by 26. It encroaches on the side yard of the garage that Mrs. Savilli is talking about. In the R10 zone, the minimum is 10, and they're asking for 10 feet is the minimum, and they're asking for proposing 5 feet. And the addition also, the maximum building lot coverage in the R10 is 20%, and they're proposing 22%. So there are two variances.
Anyone else from the board have any questions in reference to this application?
Mr. Chairman, let me just ask Ms. Savilli. Ms. Savilli, I'm assuming that this garage addition will not be utilized for any commercial purposes?
No, my husband is a collector of some classic cars, we have 3 of them.
So it would just be for hobby and personal use?
Storage.
Okay. And it will have no plumbing?
No,
Okay, and it will not be utilized as a residential dwelling?
that's a lot.
It will not be utilized as a residential dwelling?
No, it's
Okay.
strictly to put the car in.
Very good, thank you.
It's the pleasure of the board on this application.
Public.
Oh, I'm sorry. I want to open this application, open to the public. Anyone from the public wish to speak on this application? Anyone from the public wish to speak on this application?
Move the public portion to be closed.
Second.
Mr. Chairman, I just have one question. It looks like you're adding, obviously you need to add a little bit of a driveway. Is that, John, is that,
The driveway's already there.
oh, so you have that driveway that doesn't,
Driveway goes from one side of the house.
okay, that's already there?
Garage is based on top of that, we have to rip that up, the pad
Okay,
and footings, and then we're gonna put the garage on top.
okay, it's already there. All right, thanks. Answered my question, thank you.
Any other questions? What's the pleasure of the board in reference to this application?
Make a motion to approve the application is?
Second.
Roll call?
Mr. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Kaczynski?
Yes.
Mr. Kreismer?
Yes.
Mr. Corrigan?
Yes.
Mr. Henry?
Yes.
Mr. Emma?
Yes.
Ms. Cataldo?
Yes.
Mr. Esposito?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, just for the, and obviously your application is approved. Mr. Chairman, I had seen the Sevillas at the last meeting, and I told them that I would have a resolution prepared for this evening. I did send that to everybody. Let me just put in, I'll state on the record, and I'll provide this to Ms. Kemble tomorrow for signature, but the resolution states that the applicant testified that the new 13 by 26 attached garage addition is necessary for the storage of vehicles and personal property. I omitted to add in here that it will not be utilized for any commercial purposes, will have no plumbing, and will not be utilized as a residential dwelling. And that was omitted from paragraph 4 of the findings, but it is in paragraph 7 of the conditions of the approval. So if you want to, someone wants to make a motion, we can adopt this resolution this
The
evening.
only other thing I would say is we have to take Mr. Walsh.
I took him out already. I crossed him out, and I also added in that it was approved by Mr. Henry and seconded by Mr. Kreismer. So that'll be on the desk of Ms. Kemble tomorrow. So if somebody wants to make a motion to adopt the resolution and second it.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Kaczynski?
Yeah,
Mr.
yes.
Freismer?
Yes.
Ms. Cataldo?
Yes.
Mr. Corrigan?
Yes.
Mr. Henry?
Yes.
Mr. Emma?
Yes.
Mr. Esposito?
Yes.
Yes. Yep.
Okay, so it's memorialized tonight, so there's nothing further as far as the Board of Adjustment is concerned. It's been
You can
approved.
apply for your permits.
The next one is gonna be, yeah. Okay, the next application will be 17-20, Daniel and Christy Petrus.
Mr. Chairman, just for the record, I've had an opportunity to review the affidavit of publication and proof of service, and the board does have jurisdiction for this application this evening. So if somebody wants to make a motion to deem it complete, we
So
can proceed.
moved.
Second?
Thank you. Who's going to testify? Both of you? Or Mrs. Petrus only? Okay. Please raise your right hand. Swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God? All right, please state your name, spelling your last name, address for the record.
Christy Petras, last name is Petras, address is 366 Lorraine Avenue.
Okay, thank you.
Would you explain to the board exactly what you want to do at your residence?
Yes, we live on a corner lot. We
Ms.
have a-
Petrus, just put the
Oh,
microphone.
Sure.
Yeah.
We live on a corner lot, and we have a current 4-foot chain link fence. We want to just replace the existing fence with a 6-foot vinyl fence, exactly where, the same position where the current fence is.
Mr. Iacobelli, would you explain?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. The proposed fence encroaches on the front setback on the corner lot along Gordon Avenue, so the minimum is 10 feet allowed, and they're proposing 3 feet in the R7 zone.
3 inches.
3 inches? Okay, sorry, 3 inches.
The fence that's already there, is that 3 inches also? As the one that you want to propose doing?
Yes,
Same location.
same one we purchased.
Same location.
Exactly the same location.
Correct.
Any questions of the board?
So the fence needs to be 10 feet from the property line, but their house is only 7.5 feet? So really, if we followed the ordinance, the fence would be
In the house.
behind the house. Okay. Right.
Okay.
Just I have one question. So it looks like you have a blocks made of, for a sidewalk that extends out to Gordon?
Right, it was there existing when we purchased the
Okay.
home.
So is there gonna be a gate at that point?
There's currently a gate there that's right across the blocks. A gate will also be replaced in the same exact spot.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, I want to open this application up to the public. Anyone from the public wish to speak on this application in reference to Lorraine Avenue? Anyone wish to speak on this application on Lorraine Avenue?
Make a motion, we close public?
Second.
Make a motion, we approve the application?
A second.
Roll call.
Mr. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Kaczynski?
Yes?
Mr. Kreismer?
Yes.
Ms. Cataldo?
Yes.
Mr. Corrigan?
Yes.
Mr. Henry?
Yes.
Mr. Emma?
Yes.
Mr. Esposito?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, this was also an application that was supposed to be heard last month, so I did tell Mr. and Mrs. Petrus that if it was approved this evening, I would have a resolution for them. I did email that to everybody. I will note on here that Mr. Walsh is not here, and I will note on here that Mr. Henry moved it and Mr. Kreismer seconded it, so if you would like to memorialize a resolution, we can do that this evening.
So
Yes.
moved.
Second?
Okay?
Mr. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Kaczynski?
Yes?
Mr. Kreismer?
Yes.
Ms. Cataldo?
Yes.
Mr. Corrigan?
Yes.
Mr. Henry?
Yes.
Mr. Emma?
Yes.
Mr. Esposito?
Yes.
Okay, your application's been approved.
Thank you.
All you have to do is stop down at the construction office tomorrow or at your convenience and pick up the applications and proceed.
Okay, thank you very much.
Next application will be 17-17. Darren Zazamba of 1 Deerfield Road.
Mr. Chairman, I've had an opportunity to review the affidavit of publication and proof of service. The board does have jurisdiction for this application, so we need a motion to deem it complete.
So moved.
Second?
All right, Mr. Zamba, please raise your right hand. I'll swear you in. Swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God? Please state your name, spelling your last name, address for the record.
Zamba, D-Z-A-M-B-A, 1 Deerfield Road, Harlan.
Thank you.
Would you tell us exactly what you want to do in reference to this application?
I want to put let's say, an oversized shed. It's movable, no footings, no nothing, on my property, and it's not within the entry. There'll be plenty of room for neighbors.
On the application here, it says, proposed garage?
Yes, it's wooden floor, it's more for storage.
So it's not gonna be used as a garage for cars?
Yes, I wanna have a Corvette, I wanna put it in there in the winter.
Okay.
So it's gonna look like a garage with, obviously, a garage door and...
It's gonna be a wooden structure, not like a vinyl, it's gonna have vinyl siding. It's gonna look just like it, but it's gonna be movable. It goes on gravel.
Okay.
It's like one of Amish sheds, but it's oversized.
But it'll have the appearance of a garage. Does it have an A-frame?
Yes.
Okay.
And it can, they said when if I move, I can take it with, they can put it back on the flatbed and take it away. So there'll be no footings, not a permanent structure.
Mr. Zamba, how high is the garage? What's the height?
I'm not sure. It's not that high though. It's normal,
12 feet.
I'm sorry, 14 maybe?
It's one story though, right? It's not,
Yes,
it's all right.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming you'll do, no commercial activity will be conducted out of this building? It's not gonna have any plumbing?
No.
Is it gonna have electric?
As of now, no.
Okay.
I mean, I might in future go to the town and try and get plumbing, electric.
Well, plumbing you're not gonna get.
No, plumbing, no, I'm saying electric maybe, I don't,
All right, electric,
that has to deal with the town though, right?
yeah, you'd have to deal with the town, but if we approve this, we generally do not want plumbing going in any of these
No
structures.
plumbing, no, I'm saying
Okay.
electric though.
Okay, and it will not be used for any other residential purposes other than storage?
No, sir.
Okay, it will not be used as an Airbnb or for any transient housing? Okay. Now, one issue that's come up, and Mr. Cornell pointed out to me, is apparently there's a sewer easement that runs across your property. We have a letter, I think, or an email from the sewerage authority, but it references the fact that they thought it was a shed and
Well,
not a
yeah.
garage, all right?
Well, actually, they came out, they looked at it, and I talked to Bruce, he's the head of sewer, and he said, yeah, I have no problem with it, because if we ever did have to dig it up, we can move it, no problem.
Okay. All right, so maybe we just need to update this letter to reference that it's not a shed, but a garage. I understand it's not a
Yes, it's all-
permanent
yeah.
structure. Okay, fine. All right, that's fine, we'll add that as a condition, okay.
Yeah, he came out with a few of his guys, and they pulled manhole covers, and they said it's a dead, it's a dead sewer.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the board in reference to this application?
Is it gonna be finished similar to the house?
Yes, same shingles, same, roof shingles as the siding, or as close as I can get,
Right, okay.
One of the variances?
That was
There's only one variance, Mr. Chairman. The structure exceeds the accessory structure allowable square footage of 150. He's proposing 264 square feet.
Is it one car or two car? You said you're.
One.
One, okay. Pretty big, isn't it?
Well, yeah. It'll be, I wanted to make it a little longer so I could put storage, my lawnmower and stuff. I was gonna put the door in the back so I could access,
Right, right.
Okay, I want to open this application up to the public. Anyone from the public wish to speak on this application at 1 Deerfield Road? Anyone wish to speak on this application at 1 Deerfield Road? If not,
Move the public portion be closed.
Second?
what's the pleasure of this board in reference to this application?
Make motion, we approve the application? Second?
Roll call?
Mr. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Kaczynski?
Yes.
Mr. Kreismer?
Yes.
Ms. Cataldo?
Yes.
Mr. Corrigan?
Yes.
Mr. Henry?
Yes.
Mr. Emma?
Yes.
Mr. Esposito?
Yes.
Okay, your application's been approved. We will memorialize it next month, and after which you can go to the construction office and get the necessary permits, et cetera.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, Mrs. Emmett, the only reason I did those other two resolutions this evening is they were scheduled for last month, and we had to cancel that meeting.
Okay.
So we always adopt a resolution the following month, but,
Okay, that's
Okay,
fine,
thank
thank
you.
you.
Okay, number 4. Okay, the next application is 17-18, Catherine Cubi, Cabanon.
Mr. Chairman, I've also had the opportunity to review the affidavit of publication and proof of service, and the board does have jurisdiction for this application this evening, so we need a motion to deem it complete.
So moved. Second?
Who's going to be testifying? Okay, ma'am, please raise your right hand. Swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God? You do, all right. Please state your name, spelling your last name, and your address for the record, and speak into the microphone.
Catherine Cabantan, Cabantan, 1 Downs Drive, Sayreville, New Jersey.
Thank you.
Ma'am, would you tell us exactly what you want to do in reference to this application?
Yes, we're requesting for a pool to be constructed at the side of our yard instead of the back, since there's no space at the backyard.
Mr. Chairman, there are two variances. The in-ground pool encroaches on the principal structure. The setback should be 10 feet. The minimum is, requesting is 4 feet. And the in-ground pool is not directly behind the rear building line of the house because of the situated house and lot.
All the side yards are okay?
I believe everything else is okay.
All right.
Any
Do you pro-
questions of the board?
Yes, do you propose to have a fence surrounding the
We
pool?
do have the fence, we have
Okay.
currently, yeah.
Okay. And it meets the criteria for a pool?
Yes, we do have the lock.
Okay.
For-
And I think it
yeah.
has to be 5 feet?
How high is the fence, ma'am, do you know? Is it a 6?
Is it 4?
I code 4 feet.
Well, all right, how high is your fence, though?
It's high, it's taller than me, it's higher than
Eh,
me, so
Okay.
maybe it's
It's taller than
6
4 feet? Okay.
or above 4.
Okay.
Andy would know. Yeah, the fence is, yeah. No, it's fine.
Mr. Chairman, a question in regards to, I don't know, how close is the pool to the house on the side there? I was just trying to get that idea.
We do have it measured around 10 feet from the side of the house. But it's really not really at the side, there's still a space at the back. Right, let me see, can I see that? It was 10 feet from the property, the real property line.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it looks like they're probably gonna
Yeah.
walk out of the house into the...
So we have 10 feet from the house itself.
10 feet from the
Side
house
wall.
to the coping of the pool, is that what it is?
It's 10 feet from, yes, from the
Okay, thank you.
side.
Well, no, it's
Of the
actually
pro-
4
property.
feet.
Seeing that, I'm seeing 4 feet, yeah.
Is
I
it
don't
just
see-
4
That's
feet?
the variance you're seeking. In other words, you're supposed to be 10 feet, but you're only 4 feet. I'm assuming you must walk out of the house to that paver area? Is there an entrance on the side of your house near the pool?
Yeah, we have an entrance at the back.
And it's only in the back, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Yeah, but, Mr. Chairman, it's 4 feet based on the survey.
Yeah, 4 foot 1 inch.
Yeah, that's fine, yeah.
Any other questions?
I just have a question. I think I asked this before. Why is it 10 feet? Is there a reason?
Historically?
Well, no, just, there might be a very important reason and regarding safety or something else, and if we just disregard that because we don't understand it, it could be a problem. But if we understand why it's 10 feet and it's something we could deal with, then it's okay.
Want to take a stab at it?
Since the last zoning ordinance approvals or establishment of the regulations and standards, it's been 10 feet. 10 feet seems like a number, so it's, it's a little more than, you don't want it 2 feet away, obviously, right, coming out of the step of a doorway. But 4 feet does seem like the minimum you could have.
Yeah,
I mean, it's.
I don't think it's a safety issue.
I don't, it's
Yeah,
not like
yeah.
the foundation's gonna,
No.
the house is gonna cave in, or there's some other reason.
Well,
That's
if it does and the pool's not installed properly, but, yeah, but I don't think it's a safety issue.
You want it, I mean, if I may, it's 10 feet from the fence though, right? Because you don't want kids jumping on from the fence into the
Right.
pool. I mean, that's the safety issue.
That's the safety issue
Right.
there.
But it is 10 feet, am I reading that correct? 10.5 feet from the fence?
Yes.
Okay.
But it's 4 feet from the house, but
4 feet from the house. Is there decking there? Can a kid,
We don't have a deck. The deck
walk
is,
down?
the deck is at the back, but it's just very small.
okay.
you have a patio
Thank
around
you.
this. You're going to have
The
pavers
back.
around this pool, right?
We're going to make, right now it's grass.
I understand that, but when you construct the pool, from the coping of the pool to your house, you're going to have a paver patio?
Yes, we're
Okay,
going
that's-
to.
That's what's shown on the plan?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
What is the stone tracking pad? See on the side.
Oh, here.
Mr. Chairman, that's access. That's how they'll get in to go through and build a pool. So they're gonna create a temporary
Yeah.
driveway for soil erosion purposes. And that'll be removed after the project's complete.
If this application is approved, when do you intend to start the construction?
If the weather runs good and if it's okay with the company to construct. Once we get the permits, then they can start anytime. It depends on how the weather runs.
See.
Yeah.
Let me just add one other thing here, Mr. Chairman, just looking at this. It looks to me like this is the optimal location for this pool because the elevation at all four corners of the pool will be 92 feet.
You see that?
All right, so that's why, that's probably the optimal location to put this pool, and that's why it's 4 feet from the house.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyone else have any questions? I'm gonna open this application up to the public. Anyone from the public wish to speak on this application concerning a pool at One Downs Drive? Anyone from the public wish to speak on this application at One Downs Drive?
Move to close the public portion.
Second.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the application be approved.
Second.
Roll call.
Mr. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Kaczynski?
Yes.
Mr. Kreismer?
Yes.
Ms. Cataldo?
Yes.
Mr. Corrigan?
Yes.
Mr. Henry?
Yes.
Mr. Emma?
Yes.
Mr. Esposito?
Yes.
Okay, your application's been approved. Next month, on the 25th of October, we will memorialize this application. After that time, you're free to go to the construction office and get the necessary permits.
Thank you, sir.
The next application is 17-25. Jolene Capadana, 27 Marshall Place.
Mr. Chairman, I've had an opportunity to review the affidavit of publication proof of service. The board does have jurisdiction for this application this evening. We need a motion to deem it complete.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All right, Ms. Capadonna? Yes. Okay, please raise your right hand. Swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God? All right, please state your name, spelling your last name and address for the record.
Jolene Capadonna, Cappadona, 27 Marshall Place in Saraville.
Thank you.
Ma'am, would you explain to the board exactly what you want to do at your residence?
We are looking to do a whole house renovation. Where we ran into our little issue here is we are squaring off the house. So right now, the front of our house is 5 feet wider than the rest of it. So we wanted to square off, and that is what, and the first part puts us over on building coverage. It is concrete right now, and we are putting building there. So it's really only 100 square foot addition on the first floor. And then we are doing a full second floor on the house. It's currently a Cape Cod, so it's just 2 bedrooms upstairs. So we're making it a full second floor with 3 bedrooms and a bathroom, and then a walk-up attic.
Mr. Chairman, there are 3 variances for this lot in the R5 zone. The first one is the first floor addition exceeds the maximum building lot coverage. 20% is the maximum, and they're proposing 25%. It exceeds the lot impervious coverage in the R5 zone for 45 feet maximum, and they're proposing 47%. And it exceeds the allowable 2.5-story in the R5 zone. They're proposing 3 levels, a 3rd story.
John, is the 3rd story the attic? You said there was going to be a walk-up attic?
Correct.
All right, is that going to be utilized as a bedroom or for storage?
There is a piece of it that is going to be used as an office, really my husband's hobby area. Our architect told us that we are allowed 30% of the floor below it for usable space, and he, according to his calculations, we're at 26.
Let me ask you a few more questions. You're going to have 1 kitchen in this house?
Yes.
Okay. It'll be a single-family house. It
Correct.
will not be utilized as a 2-family house.
Correct.
And it will have one entrance, 1 front door entrance?
It has a front door and a side door. We have a side door currently.
Okay, where does the side door lead to?
It's going to lead to a hallway in between our kitchen and our mudroom.
All right, so that side door does not lead up to a separate staircase to
No.
the second floor?
There's only one staircase in the
Okay.
house.
All right.
Anyone from the board, any questions?
I don't really understand where they're adding. Can that be explained? Is it this little bump out on the left?
Yes.
Look at the other sheet, look third page.
Second sheet.
No, this is pretty big.
See, it's crosshatch.
This is now being, in
Oh,
addition,
that's-
it's gonna be
oh.
square, there, it's just existing
Okay,
concrete.
that
They're gonna widen it.
crosshatch, okay, all right, okay. That's good. So I just wanted to understand, the house really isn't getting any bigger.
It's 100 square feet.
Yeah.
On the first floor.
You're not going like outside what you would see from the front? Okay. Thank you, that answers the question.
Anyone else, any questions? If no further questions, I want to open this application up to the public. Anyone wish to speak on this application in reference 27 Marshall Place? Anyone from the public wish to speak on this application, 27 Marshall Place?
Move the public portion be closed?
Second.
Just one follow-up question, since we got talking about the attic and all that, I'm assuming that the height is under the
Yes,
requirement?
35 feet, you're under
We're at
35 feet.
29.
Okay, thank you.
I just have one question. I'm assuming your architect has designed it with ingress and egress windows?
Yes.
From that attic in the event of a fire?
Yep.
Okay, fine.
Okay, it's the pleasure of the board.
Make a motion, we approve the application?
Second.
Roll call.
Mr. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Kaczynski?
Yes,
Mr. Kreismer?
Yes.
Ms. Cataldo? Yes. Mr. Corrigan?
Yes.
Mr. Henry?
Yes.
Mr. Emma?
Yes.
Mr. Esposito?
Yes.
Okay, your application's been approved. It'll be memorialized at our next meeting, which will be October the 25th. After that date, you can go to the construction office and get your necessary permits and proceed from there. We're moving right along. Yeah. Okay, we got application number 6, Recovery Centers of America. Okay, the next application is 17-21, Recovery Centers of America, 901 Ernstine Road. This is an appeal.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, let me just explain what we have in front of us this evening, because we normally don't have these. We've had a few of them over the years, but under the municipal land use law, 40:55D-70, which is the statute that basically gives powers to the zoning board, one of those powers under subsection A is to hear appeals of a decision of a zoning officer. We normally don't hear this. Normally, we hear what are called C variances, which we just heard five of them, or D variances, which are use variances. So this is a variance, or an A, it's an appeal under Section A. So essentially, our zoning officer, Mr. Mashansky, has made a determination with respect to the issuance of a zoning permit, and I would like him, once I'm done speaking, to indicate what he did or did not do in this matter. And the applicant has appealed that decision, which is their right under the statute, and they're going to make a presentation to this board, which will then be considered as to whether or not Mr. Mashansky's decision was correct. So that's essentially why we're here tonight. So I know Mr. Himmelman wants to introduce himself. For the record, we can do that, but I'd like Mr. Mashansky as well to indicate, what action he took, so.
Thank you, Mr. Sachs. Everyone hear me? Chairman Green, nice to see you. Members of the board, nice to see you. As Mr. Sachs indicated, this is a matter involving a denial of a zoning permit application by your zoning officer, Mr. Mashansky. I represent the permit applicant, if you will. Recovery Centers of America. I do have an opening statement. I'd like to at least have the board understand how we got here, what the issues are, who our witnesses are going to be this evening, and the order of our presentation. And obviously, you may have questions of me before I proceed with any witnesses, but at least allow me the opportunity to go through my presentation. I would appreciate that. As I indicated, and Mr. Sachs is absolutely correct, so my client, Recovery Centers of America, filed an appeal for this hearing after Mr. Mashansky denied the zoning permit, which our client filed, and that was on July 14th, 2017. Under the municipal land use law, and Mr. Sachs correctly pointed out, under NJSA 40:55D 70A and 72A, as a result of your zoning officer's administrative action denying the zoning permit, this appeal was filed, and under NJSA, under the municipal land use law, under section 70A, this board has jurisdiction to hear that. And just for the record, I just want to just cite that provision so that there's no misunderstanding, because the zoning board has the power to hear and decide this appeal where it's alleged by the appellant, in this case, Recovery Centers of America, that there's an error in any order, decision, or refusal of an administrative officer based on or made in the enforcement of your zoning ordinance. As we present tonight, Recovery Centers of America believes that the denial of the zoning permit was an error, and such actions were arbitrary and capricious and should be reversed by this board based on the facts and legal grounds which we intend to present in our appeal tonight. So that's basically the legal framework why we're here, and the right for this board to hear this. As I indicated, we've got several witnesses. We do have a representative of Recovery Centers of America, David Dorshu, who is currently the Chief Executive Officer at one of our facilities in Mays Landing at Lighthouse, and he will be testifying, basically giving an overview of the various levels of treatment programs available and the services RCA provides. In addition, we'll be introducing a couple of exhibits. One is an exhibit which compares the previously approved nursing home facility, Briar Wood, and its services that it was approved for by your planning board as a nursing home and long-term care facility, and the proposed use that RCA would like to move forward with in the borough. In addition, we have James Higgins, who's our professional planner. He will testify on the uses and services which Recovery Center provides and how that falls within the definition of long-term care facility and nursing home as defined in your code, which you'll hear later on was the premise by which Mr. Mashansky denied the permit. Finally, we'll have John Rea, who's our traffic consultant, who's going to testify on the traffic impact, primarily analyzing. I know Mr. Rea is not here yet, but will be coming hopefully later. He has a meeting, and he will be arriving. I know you know John. And he will basically testify on the traffic impact, primarily comparing the previous approved use on this property that was approved by your planning board to what is currently proposed. Just by way of background, sort of how did we get here? So Recovery Centers of America has finalized business terms to lease the property at 901 Ernston Road, which is where the subject property is, and they currently, 901 Ernston Road Realty LLC currently owns the property. Historically, some of you may be aware, Sayreville Nursing Home LLC previously received preliminary and final site plan approval from our planning board, and that was on May 21st, initially back in 2014, to operate a long-term care nursing facility. The resolution of approval adopted by the planning board confirmed that the applicant at that time proposed to demolish the existing nursing home on the above property and move forward with the plans submitted. They ultimately filed an amended site plan application to the Saraville Planning Board in 2015, which included modifications to the building, landscaping, other improvements, including sidewalks, and copies of those approvals had been submitted with our materials to Mr. Mashansky. The important thing to note here is that the proposed facility to be constructed by Saraville Nursing was permitted as of right in the prime zone, and that was codified in both the resolutions from 2014 and 15. As part of the formal lease agreement, my client sought confirmation from the borough that its intended facility, which will operate at the property, is a permitted use in the prime zone, despite a detailed submission outlining the similarities between RCA's proposed use, RCA's use and the currently approved use. Mr. Mashansky, as we know, at this point determined that the proposed use is not permitted in the prime zone, and that was primarily the basis by which he denied the application for the zoning permit. Just to orient the board and for the board to better understand the nature of RCA's proposed business. When I say RCA, I'm referring to Recovery Centers of America. The planning board testimony will, the planning testimony will refer and identify certain provisions of your land development code, which we believe, and I believe, are instructive on the use question. As you'll hear from representatives from Mr. Dorshu on the services, RCA provides a full range of 24-hour direct medical, nursing, and other health services for its patients. They provide education, treatment, rehabilitation services, and recovery support for substance abuse and mental health disorders. The facility's services will include a wide range of intensive care treatment options, 24-hour nursing care and monitoring and supervision, rehabilitation programs, psychiatric service, psychological services, recreational therapy, medication monitoring, and wellness programs. In addition, they will treat patients and continue to provide services to its patients for an extended period of time. And as I said, further detail will be provided by RCA's representative on that. Just further background, Recovery Centers of America has received approvals and operates in 8 facilities in New Jersey, Maryland, and Pennsylvania, and Massachusetts. In Devon, Pennsylvania, RCA received an approval for its facility, recognizing that it operated in a similar manner as the previously occupied long-term care facility at that particular location. In addition, RCA has commenced legal action in federal court against Gloucester Township, which is in South Jersey, upon its denial of a land use application to operate a long-term care facility. In that matter, the federal court issued an injunction in that case directing the zoning board to vote in favor of its application and proposed facility. Focusing on the code section at issue, which is in your definitions section under your land development code, there's a provision dealing with long-term care facility and nursing home facility and nursing home. And in that ordinance and definition, it specifically lays out how the borough was to handle those particular use. And what it goes on to say is it means it's a facility which provides a full range of 24-hour direct medical nursing and other health services, registered nurses, licensed practical nurses, and nursing aides provide services prescribed by a resident's physician. It's for those older adults who need health supervision but not hospitalization. The emphasis is on nursing care, but restorative, physical, occupational, speech, and respiratory therapies are also provided. This level of care may also include specialized nursing services, such as intravenous feeding or medication, tube feeding, injection medication, daily wound care, rehabilitation services, and monitoring unstable conditions. The above-cited definition, which I just referred to, comports also with the definition described in the complete illustrated book of development definitions, which is also a resource that many land use practitioners and planners rely on. And in that particular fourth edition, it defines long-term care facility to mean an institution or part of an institution that is licensed or approved to provide health care under medical supervision for 24 or more consecutive hours to 2 or more patients. As you know from the documentation and the appeal that we filed, we believe, and RCA contends, that it meets the definition of a long-term care facility and therefore should be permitted to operate in the prime zone. As far as the previously approved site plan, Recovery Centers of America will rely on the previously approved site plan and intends on making no modifications to the footprint of the building or any of the overall approval that the planning board granted back in 14 and then subsequently in 2015. The services of the facility will include, and you'll hear testimony, 24-hour nursing care, as well as rehabilitation services listed in the borough's definitions. The patients who would receive treatment at the facility will include adults who suffer from physical and mental comorbidities and substance use disorders requiring medical attention, usually in the form of nursing care, but typically not hospitalization, the precise class of people that the borough's definition was intended to support. Further, on the definition, as I indicated in the complete illustrated book of development definitions, the facility is compliant, providing appropriate licensed 24-hour care to multiple patients with familial relation. RCA performs as a long-term care facility, including rehabilitation for its patients. Thus, it seems clear to us that the proposed use falls squarely within the definition of that I've described under the uses in your code relating to long-term care and nursing home facilities. Focusing on a particular phrase in that definition, the term older adults, as stated in the above ordinance, is not defined and in our belief is ambiguous. Moreover, the term older adults is also not defined in the municipal land use law. As such, due to the ambiguity of such term, old adults should be construed in favor of RCA. Further, any attempt to discriminate based on age is illegal absent narrow exceptions, such as a 55 older housing community or juveniles, and none of those exceptions apply here. In addition, RCA's patients are handicapped and disabled under federal law, including but not limited to the Federal Fair Housing Act and the American with Disabilities Act, otherwise known as ADA. Similarly, disabled individual patients are also protected under New Jersey law against discrimination. Drug and alcohol is a huge problem in this state and this country, and as a result, the federal and state legislative schemes have recognized that these patients are protected and should be treated accordingly. The failure to consider RCA's facility as a permitted use, in RCA's belief, would constitute discrimination under the New Jersey law against discrimination. The Fair Housing Act, because it says it shall be an unlawful discrimination for a municipality to exercise the power to regulate land use or housing in a manner that discriminates on the basis of disability. More particularly, under that particular statute, and because the facility has the same or similar uses as a long-term care facility, the failure to approve this as a permitted use constitutes unlawful discrimination against disabled persons that is prohibited and entitles a potential applicant to damages. In addition, the Federal Fair Housing Act defines discrimination to include a refusal to make reasonable accommodations in rules, policies, practice, or services when such are necessary to provide access to housing for the disabled. The failure to recognize this proposed facility as a permitted use is in essence a refusal to make reasonable accommodations in such rules, policy, practices, and services. You may ask, well, what is a reasonable accommodation? The Federal Fair Housing Act defines discrimination to include a refusal to make reasonable accommodations in rules, policies, and practices and services when such accommodations are necessary to provide access to housing for the disabled. Also, as I mentioned, the American with Disabilities Act, otherwise known as ADA, provides that no qualified individual with a disability shall, by reason of such disability, be excluded from participation in or denied the benefits of a service program or activity of a public entity, or be subjected to discrimination by such entity, and makes it unlawful for a public entity in determining the size or location of facility to make selections that have the purpose or effect of excluding individuals with disabilities from denying them the benefits of or otherwise subjecting them to discrimination. The New Jersey law against discrimination also prohibits a municipality, county, or other local, civil, or political subdivision of the state or officer, employee, or agent thereof to exercise the power to regulate land use or housing in a manner that discriminates on the basis of disability. Based upon that sort of detailed analysis, the failure to consider this proposed facility as a permitted use would constitute, in our belief, discrimination under the New Jersey law against discrimination. Under the Fair Housing Act, as I said, because it should be unlawful discrimination for a municipality to exercise the power to regulate land use or housing in a manner that discriminates on the basis of disability, and because the proposed facility has the same or similar uses as a long-term care facility. RCA espouses that the failure to approve this as a permitted use constitutes unlawful discrimination against disabled persons that is prohibited and entitles them to potential damages and attorney's fees. Based on that opening and presentation, RCA would ask this board to ultimately reverse the zoning office's determination and cite this as a permitted use in the zone. That's my opening, and I don't have any further facts or legal issues to present, and if the board doesn't have any questions, we can present our first witness.
Mr. Chairman, I have one question and a general comment. First of all, Mr. Himmelman, the question I have is you referenced a case in Gloucester Township. Was it Gloucester Township?
Correct.
Okay. I would assume in that case that was a lawsuit that emanated from a decision by the Gloucester City Zoning Board to deny a use variance application?
There was several proceedings, I believe, both involving the planning and zoning boards in Gloucester Township, but that is correct, yes.
Right. But, so it went to the merits of a development application?
It went to the merits of a development application, but it also dealt with the various federal and state discrimination laws that but generally that's correct, yes.
All right, because we know in New Jersey law, obviously, if someone's going to file a prerogative writ on a denial of a use variance application, you certainly have recourse to go to federal court as well.
That's correct.
If you feel. Okay.
That's correct.
And my second comment is I appreciate Mr. Himmelman's education on the law. However, Mr. Himmelman is not a witness in this matter. In my opinion, and I think he's done a good job of it, he's provided testimony on behalf of his client. However, it's not evidentiary. So, yes, it's for educational purposes, but any of his comments that were made on the record in that opening statement are not evidentiary, and Mr. Himmelman is not a witness, and we will hear from his witnesses, and that's what you will base your decision on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does the board have any other questions or comments before we proceed?
Actually, I think what we want to do is, Mr. Mashansky, maybe if you can just give me a minute and just explain the genesis of the filing of the application for a permit and just give us the scenario as to your decision resulting in this appeal.
Yeah, as you know, Mr. Himmelman came in.
Just for the record, Mr. Mashansky, Andrew Mashansky is a zoning officer of the Borough of Sayreville.
Yes, I think Mr. Himmelman has summed up that this location, 901 Ernston Road, has been a long-term healthcare facility, a nursing home for quite some time, and it's reached planning board site plan approval to rebuild the area. So we know this area very well. We know it to be as long-term nursing care facility. Shortly thereafter, Mr. Himmelman came in with a different kind of use in my mind, although he does describe the uses are quite similar. and comports with exactly what our definition falls under, long-term facility. In his description, I have to say that there are a lot of similarities, but as we know and envision 901 Ernst Road, Briarwood as we know it, I do not see that there are similarities in complete. There are some disparities that I would say that it does not jive. One of them, just going by the definition, as we know, and he didn't mention it earlier, it starts out with long-term facility nursing home means. Well, we know a nursing home and what it involves, the ambiance, the nature of it. It deals with the elderly. It's a 24-hour facility. Yes, there's nurses and doctors. But one thing really does stick out with that has disparity between the two uses. And Mr. Himmelman does try to define it and try to separate and then bring it back to a similarity. And it falls under the level of the actual age. And it states it is for those older adults who need health supervision. That's a key word, older adults. Mr. Himmelman will say that there's no definition of it. Well, you don't need a definition, and just because there is no definition doesn't mean that you exempt it and don't include it and you cannot compare. It's up to the board to decide what is considered older adults. His use deals with all ages. And older adults, as we know it as 901 Briarwood, it deals with mom and dad, grandpa, and it's different. Now, there might be case law. I can't get involved with that. That's not my expertise. But the best way to summarize it would be Mr. Himmelman will say that everything jives, it comports, it walks like a duck, it swims like a duck, it flies like a duck. Must be a duck. Well, it might be a goose. They all do the same thing. A goose is not a duck. So that's how I kind of looked at it, just to keep it just in my mind. But ultimately, it's up to the board to decide, is this the same thing?
All right.
That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Mashansky.
Mr. Chairman, can I get one, ask our lawyer here for clarification? The question here is then the age of the people that are going to be using the facility?
No, the question is, I mean, that's obviously what the definition in our ordinance talks about, what a long-term facility is or a nursing home is. But your determination, based after you hear the testimony and the evidence from Mr. Himmelman's witnesses, and not from Mr. Himmelman, but from Mr. Himmelman's witnesses, whether or not Mr. Mashansky's decision not to grant the zoning permit was not arbitrary, capricious, and unreasonable. That's a standard. I mean, the zoning officer in every municipality in the state of New Jersey has the authority to issue a zoning permit. If after investigating a particular application determines that the use is the same use. If it is a different use, if it's a different use by a scintilla, then it's not the same use. All right, so you'll hear the testimony and you'll make a decision based on that. I mean, I have a number of questions which I'll reserve to ask because I'm curious, but we'll proceed forward.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Okay, great. David? As indicated, our first witness is David Dorshu on behalf, and he'll be testifying on behalf of Recovery Centers of America. And I guess we should have Mr. Dorshu sworn in.
Sure. Sir, please raise your right hand. I'll swear you in. Swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
All right, please state your name, spelling your last name, professional affiliation for the record.
My name is David Dorshu, and I'm the CEO of...
Can you spell your last name, sir? Okay.
D as in David, O-R-S-C-H-U. I'm employed by Recovery Centers of America. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of one of the RCA facilities, which is located in Mays Landing, New Jersey, Atlantic County.
Okay, thank you. What was the spelling again, Mr. Dorshu? It's D-O-R?
S-C.
S-C.
HU.
Gotcha, thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
We'll have to share a mic.
Okay. Does the other
A
one work?
second, Mike?
Hold on, maybe it's working now.
Oh, it is?
They're temperamental.
Apparently not.
That one never works.
No more
That's all right,
batteries,
don't worry.
John?
I'll speak loudly. Your Worship, good evening. You've indicated whom you're currently employed. Can you just give a brief background of what your current responsibilities are? And I'm going to use RCA for the record, just so it's clear I'm referring to Recovery Centers of America.
Yes, good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the board. I appreciate the opportunity to present tonight. My name is David Dorsher, and as I said, I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Lighthouse. The Lighthouse is an RCA facility located in Mays Landing, New Jersey. So my responsibilities include financial performance, include maintaining licensure and compliance issues, that type of thing.
Very good. And to your knowledge, how many facilities does RCA own and or manage?
Currently, we own and manage 8 facilities.
Oh, thanks. Very good. Now, just turning specifically to the RCA services, could you describe the general treatment options which RCA intends to provide to its patients at the proposed facility here in Saraville?
Yes. There will be a total of 5 what we refer to as clinical levels of care as defined by the American Society of Addiction Medicine. And those levels of care are detoxification services, residential services, partial care, intensive outpatient, and general outpatient services.
Now, have you had an opportunity to review or have a general working knowledge of the prior approval that Mr. Mashansky was referring to at the current property?
Mm-hmm.
And what's your understanding of that prior approval?
Well, my understanding is that for a long-term nursing care facility, it, as was stated earlier, is defined as offering medical and nursing services on a 24-hour-a-day basis, which is what our facility in Mays Landing does and what the proposed facility here in Saraville will do.
Very good. Now, we've brought some exhibits with us this evening. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And one exhibit, Mr. Sachs, I guess we can mark this
A1.
as A1. Oh, do you have a pen? Can you initial that? Mark it A1 and just initial that with your initials and put today's date on it.
What's that? Easel. Back here.
Okay. And for the record, could you please identify, and we also have handouts for the board members, I believe, of this exhibit. Do we have those? Oh, here we go. Joan, do you want to circulate these? Thank you. While we're...
If you want to use this, we
Oh, that's fine.
give you our easel.
That's fine. We'll rent it free.
Oh, yeah, look, no charge.
Got it there. That's great. Thanks, Ev. You'll be able to see, members of the board, you'll be able to see this and hopefully, as you look at your handout. So, Mr. Dorsher, just for the record, if you could identify what's now been marked as A1, if you could just identify what that is, and then we'll get into some questions.
Sure, this is the rehabilitation services, approved use for Briarwood, and then proposed use for Recovery Centers of America at the 901 Ernston Road site.
So this is basically, as I understand it, and you correct me if I'm wrong, it's a comparison between the prior approved use by the planning board of Briarwood for a nursing facility, breaking down services, quality of life, mission operations, and clinical staffing, and comparing that to the same proposed use that RCA will look to operate at the 901 Ernston Road location. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So if you could just walk us through sort of the highlights of A1 and illustrate for us the various services and other items that we will perform, and when I say we, RCA and Briarwood, and what your understanding of that comparison is.
Sure, I'll hit on some highlights. Under the services section, 24-hour skilled nursing care is the first listing. In our facility, we have both registered nurses and licensed practical nurses that are at the facility 24 hours a day. So we have 24-hour-a-day coverage of nursing care. We also have interdisciplinary care planning, which means both from a medical perspective as well as from a clinical perspective. The care planning also includes aftercare planning for when clients are leaving the facility and being discharged. We have 7 days a week therapy. We have therapy groups. We have educational groups. We have family groups. We also have adjunctive therapies such as art therapy, music therapy, fitness, that type of thing. Health management, including management of chronic illnesses. We have a registered dietitian. We have extensive medical care through a medical director, physicians, psychiatrists, nurse practitioners, and psychiatric nurse practitioners as well. We also do diagnostic lab work as well. Moving down to quality of life, we provide semi-private accommodations. In my facility, all of our rooms have only 2 beds, and we have one room with a single bed. We have our meals are provided, and we receive excellent patient satisfaction scores on our meals. So the food that we provide is very pleasing and satisfying to the clients, and we pay attention to those satisfaction surveys very closely. Laundry services, phone services. We offer religious or spiritual services for various denominations that are able to explore the spiritual aspect of their recovery. So we offer that as well. Mission of operations, to improve the health and well-being for our residents. The mission of Recovery Centers of America is to help 1 million people gain long-lasting and meaningful recovery. And that is a very compelling mission, but that is what we are striving for as a company. That is what we strive for every day in the facility in Mays Landing, and will also occur in Sayreville as well. As far as our staffing, we have, as I mentioned, physicians. We have a medical director who is certified in addiction medicine. We have psychiatrists. We have nurse practitioners. As I mentioned, we have both registered nurses and licensed practical nurses. We have licensed social workers. We have licensed counselors on staff, as well as recovery support staff, administrative staff, et cetera. As I said, we have licensed nursing staff, on-staff physicians. We have social service professionals, which assist the clients in what we refer to as our case management duties of ensuring that the clients, when they're discharged from our facility, are discharged to an appropriate clinical setting as they step down in levels of care, and experienced administrative professionals. So everything on this list, as Mr. Himmelman had indicated, for Briarwood, for approved use for Briarwood, is also consistent with, number one, the proposed use at Ernston Road, but also currently what we do in my facility in Mays Landing.
So what conclusions do you draw from this particular exhibit, and what is it that, what idea do you want to convey to the board on that exhibit?
What I want to convey to the board is that the approved use is very consistent and actually identical with the proposed use that would occur through Recovery Centers of America.
Thank you. Now, you've heard and you've had, I presume, had an opportunity to look at the Sayreville ordinance that both myself and Mr. Mashansky was referring to, correct?
Yes.
Okay, let me just finish my question before you, because I want you to pick up on the tape correctly. Now, based upon the definition that I described and went through under long-term care facilities and nursing home facilities, and as Mr. Mashansky referred to, do you believe that the uses and the various programs and staffing that the ordinance was intended to cover would be included both for the approved use of Briarwood and for the proposed RCA use?
I do. The services that we offer, the staffing levels that we maintain, we are licensed by the New Jersey Office of Licensing. So the services that we offer, the staffing that we maintain, the fact that we are a 24-hour-a-day facility, to me, is consistent with the approved use of Briarwood.
And as you've indicated, both the approved use of Briarwood and the proposed use of RCA will operate on a 24-hour basis, correct?
Yes, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Correct. Okay, thank you. Now, in your position and your, now how long have you worked in the industry?
I've worked in the industry for 22 years postgraduate. I've worked for RCA for 13 months since August of 2016.
Now, as to your understanding, are the patients both at Mays Landing facility and what will reside at the proposed use here in Sayreville, are those patients protected or considered handicapped or disabled
Yes.
under federal or state law?
Under federal and state law, they are protected under the ADA, as was mentioned earlier.
All right. So turning to the proposed RCA facility, you're generally familiar with the site and the proposed project, is that correct?
I am.
Okay. What is the range of size of facilities that you have worked at previously?
Well, the facility that I currently work at is a total of 53 beds, and we're expanding to 135 beds. I have also worked in facilities that totaled 110 beds and 132 beds.
And how many beds are proposed for the RCA facility here?
The RCA facility here, proposed number of beds is 149.
149, okay. Now, what does that mean in terms of the number of patients?
Well, if we're projecting 90% capacity, then we're looking at about 134, 135 patients.
Now, just to educate the board, can you, I mean, I know you've went through the services and described them and compared them to the approved use, but can you sort of give us a flavor of the care that the patients receive and how that is generally handled?
Sure. When a patient is admitted into our facility, then they go through a thorough biopsychosocial assessment to assess, again, what we refer to as appropriate level of care. They go through a clinical assessment, an admission assessment, as well as a nursing and medical assessment. So it is assessed what level of care would be appropriate for them. In a detoxification level of care, they are receiving medical care as they go through the detoxification process. The detoxification process usually lasts an average of about 7 days. During that time, they are receiving medications for the detoxification protocol. They are attending group sessions. They are attending education sessions, as well as individual therapy. As they step down to the residential level of care, they are also receiving group services. They are also receiving family services. We have a very robust family program because research indicates the more that families are involved in the treatment process, that projects to more favorable treatment outcomes. So I also mentioned that we have adjunctive therapy such as art therapy, music therapy. We offer spiritual services. So between groups, educations, and individual therapy, that's what the services that we offer to the clients. We also work very hard to make sure, as I mentioned, when the clients are discharged, prior to their discharge, that they have been set up with appropriate continuing care. When they leave our facility, where are they going? What level of care are they going into? And that includes not only treatment services, but also, if the need exists, sober living services as well. Living in a sober living or what is also referred to as a recovery house, because that is a need that some of the clients have.
Now, you talked a little bit in the beginning of your testimony about some of the levels of care, and you mentioned detoxification program. Can you just basically describe a little bit of what that is, particularly from the transition from when the patient is an inpatient and then when they leave and they may come back as an outpatient? If you could sort of describe that and how that works.
Sure. Most of at Lighthouse, where I work, about 99% of our clients actually enter into our facility in a detox level of care and then step down to a residential level of care. And after the residential level of care, after that time is exhausted, then clients are stepping down to either a partial level of care or an intensive outpatient level of care. When you hit partial level of care or intensive outpatient, then they're not staying in your facility anymore 24 hours a day. At the detoxification level and at the residential level, they are staying in your facility. As they are discharged, they're stepping down to either a partial level of care or intensive outpatient level of care. So as you progress through the treatment process, each subsequent level of care is decreasing in treatment intensity.
Okay. Now, you mentioned a little bit about some of the staffing, and you know the definition under the Sayreville Code talks about, under long-term care facilities, talks about registered nurses, licensed practical nurses, et cetera. Can you describe the staff that will provide the care at the proposed facility?
We have different disciplines within our facility and what will be at this facility as well. As I mentioned, we have full medical services, which are provided by physicians, as I mentioned, both psychiatrists, physicians, nurse practitioners, okay, all certified by the state. We also have nursing staff. We have a director of nursing, and we have registered nurses as well as LPNs that are also serving the clients. It should be noted that our staffing patterns at RCA actually exceed the state regulations because we want to provide the best care possible. So the regulations say you're staffing at that level, but we actually staff higher than that. We also have primary therapists who are clinically trained, and our primary therapists are master's level clinicians or above, and most of them are licensed by the state as well as what we refer to as LCADCs. We have recovery support specialists, and their job is to provide education to the clients as well as what we refer to as milieu management. And that basically means making sure the clients are monitored, they're observed, and they're where they need to be as far as in this group or seeing the doctor or having an individual session, that type of thing. We also have a family therapist who is a licensed marriage and family therapist. Again, our family program is really foundational to the treatment philosophy that we have. We also have drivers. We provide transportation for clients. We have administrative staff. We have an entire admissions department whose single job is to work with the client when they come in the door for admission. We also have utilization review staff, which is the interface between the facility and the funding source. So those are the primary, disciplines that we have from a staffing standpoint.
So is it fair to say, again, going back to Exhibit A1, so we're talking about nurses who are licensed, therapists, physicians, et cetera, that those particular professionals would be, in your view, be within a nursing home as we understand that, and as Mr. Mashansky referred to in the ordinance versus what is proposed here. Is that a fair statement?
Well, it's a fair statement to say that it does equal or meet the approved use currently at my facility in Mays Landing, but then also for the proposed use on Ernston Road.
Okay, thank you very much on that. If you could just give us a little information on what license and approvals the RCA facility will operate under.
The RCA facility will operate under actually 3 different licenses, again, licensed by the New Jersey State Office of Licensing. You have a license to provide detoxification services. You have a license to provide long-term rehabilitation services, which is the way the Office of License defines it, as well as licenses for partial care, intensive outpatient, and outpatient. So those are the licenses that we're dealing with. We are inspected by the state on an annual basis.
And the license that would be required for the Briarwood facility would be also approved and be sought from the state of New Jersey?
What would be sought from the state of New Jersey would be through the Office of Licensing, yes.
And that would apply both for the approved use and the proposed use, correct? Now, we talked a little bit about this, but if you could just educate us on are all the patients at the proposed use going to be residential?
No. At the proposed use site, probably about 85% of the patients will be what we refer to as residential, which is the highest 2 levels of care, detoxification and residential. And then approximately 15% of those clients will be what we refer to as under the umbrella of outpatient, which again includes partial care, intensive outpatient, and outpatient. So approximately 85% will be living there, and 15% will be coming for their treatment and then going home at night.
Thank you. Now, if you could tell us what percentage of the staff is used for the outpatient compared to the residential treatment, please.
The outpatient staff at my facility is about 5% of my total number of employees, and that would be projected to be similar at the proposed site.
Now, do the outpatient and residential patients interact at all?
They do not. Programmatically, they are kept separate and physically separated. So your detox and residential patients are not interacting with the outpatient folks.
Now, is there family counseling part of the residential care and outpatient treatment?
Yes. As I said, we have a strong component of our treatment offerings is family therapy, and we do that in a number of different ways. We have, as I said, a licensed marriage and family therapist who provides family counseling, which is so important in the treatment process. So that could be a husband is in treatment and the wife is coming for family counseling, or in that context, couples counseling. It could be a sister, a mother, a father. It could be children that are coming for family therapy. But we also have a wide range of family education options that we offer to families if in conjunction with family therapy, but just to learn more about what is addiction, how do we get there, how does the family member react to the person who's getting treatment, appropriate boundaries, that type of thing. If you have a loved one who's ever struggled with addiction, it is a very scary and painful experience to go through. And so the better that the family is educated on the disease concept, the addiction process, and what treatment is all about and the goals and objectives of treatment, then the outcomes have proven to be more improved. So that's a very important part of not only the folks who are inpatients, but also the folks that are outpatient as well. I was speaking to a client yesterday who had a family session with her father. And this young woman is in her early 20s. And she said, I was literally crying through my family session because my father, it was explained to my father what addiction was about, that I wasn't a bad person, that I wasn't a moral failure. And he apologized to me, and it really helped to reconcile our relationship. And now he's firmly in my corner and really behind my recovery. And that's something that's very rewarding as a treatment provider to be able to share.
Thank you for that explanation. Now, you mentioned about family visits. Could you expound upon that, and what do they entail?
Family visits occur on Saturdays and Sundays. And actually what we do is people come in and they are oriented to the facility where they will be meeting with their family member. There is a limit to the number of family members that are allowed to come to visit their loved one in the facility. And that occurs on Saturdays and Sundays. It's really important that the patient feel like they're still connected to their family, you know, and that someone still cares about them and is in their corner. So that occurs on Saturdays and Sundays.
Now, you mentioned a little bit about the residential treatment and the outpatient treatment, but if you can give us sort of an overview, you know, how does RCA and how will they get their patients and how are they referred to the facility generally?
RCA has different advertising means. We do radio advertising, television advertising. We speak at different professional symposiums and make presentations. We have a business development department that also visits with, you know, hospitals and different treatment providers in order to, that's how we acquire our clients. Some of our clients are alumni. They've been through our program before and they're coming back again. So we have, you know, many ways in which our clients come to us.
Now, do you limit this, and will RCA limit the time it receives new clients?
It will not. We admit clients 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Now, turning to a sort of another topic, how will RCA and how does it currently at your facility screen patients for safety, and how is security managed?
We have, as I mentioned, a series of very thorough assessments that we go through with clients to make sure that they're clinically appropriate to receive the treatment that we're offering for them. So those assessments include, as I mentioned, medical assessments, but also psychiatric assessments to make sure that they're appropriate for our type of facility and the type of treatment that we offer. As far as security measures go, we have very, very few incidents ever. We are constantly monitoring our clients, our staff, document and make rounds, what we refer to as make rounds on our clients to make sure that they are where they need to be. We have security cameras. We do review footage if the need arises. But we have had very, very few instances of any type of altercations between clients or anything like that. We have to operate under the approach that client safety is number one, and we take that very seriously.
Thank you for that. Now, what if the patients want to leave the facility? What's the protocol and how is that handled?
Well, we have, you can categorize the two discharges into two types. In my facility, the average length of stay that someone is in both the detox and the residential level of care is 17 days. That's the average, okay? But the two ways you would categorize discharges would be successful discharges, and that means they've completed all of their treatment care plan objectives and they've stayed a certain amount of days in order to be discharged. And then, as I said, we are then arranging for aftercare and continuing care for them, whether that be partial care IOP, whether that be in one of our programs or another program if they're going to an area where we don't have an outpatient program. We also have another type of discharge which we'll broadly label as non-routine discharge. Sometimes folks leave before the clinical team feels like it's appropriate for them to leave. But we also attempt to set them up with continuing care as well, because we want to make sure that they land on their feet and they are receiving the services that they need. There are, as you all know, there are too many people dying. New Jersey's overdose rate is 3 times higher than the national average. This year, more people will overdose and die in New Jersey from drugs than the number of people that will be killed through motor vehicle accidents and gun violence combined. It's over 4 people a day. So we want to make sure that under whatever circumstances they're leaving our facility, that we are giving them a safe place to land and doing our best to meet their needs.
Thank you for that explanation. Now, turning to just a few operational questions. How many employees are intended for the proposed facility, and will there be shifts for those employees?
The total number of employees at this point are 215. Now, the height of the busiest time, the period of time where the most employees will be on the campus, we project to be about 115 employees, and we do have 3 shifts. 7A to 3P, 3P to 11P, and 11P to 7A.
Will there be any amenities, and if so, what will be afforded at the proposed facility? If you could just describe that for us.
As I mentioned, we offer art therapy, we offer music therapy, we offer family therapy, we offer fitness, we offer something I've just become familiar with that I was unfamiliar with, and that's Reiki. We offer spiritual services. We offer a wide array of services to best meet the needs of our clients, because one of the things that's really important from a treatment perspective is not to treat every client, as everyone in the same way. Everyone needs individualized treatment to best meet their needs and to improve their chances of recovery.
Okay. Just circling back to A1 and also specifically about the definition that we referred to earlier under the Sayreville Code. So I just want to ask you a few questions, and then we can summarize your testimony. But in referring to the definition, it talks about 24-hour direct medical, nursing, and other health services. So that will be provided at the proposed facility, correct?
It will be provided. It is being provided now at our other facilities, and it will be at the proposed facility.
And when the ordinance definition refers to registered nurses and practical nurses and resident physicians, they will all be staffed at the proposed facility as they would be in the approved Briarwood, correct?
Correct.
And the health, the overall health care of the facility, this is not a hospital, correct?
It's non-hospital.
Right, and it's under medical supervision.
It is.
All right. And it includes, it will include, as you've indicated, at the RCA facility will include a variety of rehabilitation services, correct?
A wide array of rehabilitation services, yes.
Okay, fine. Mr. Dorshad, do you have anything else you'd like to add or any other points you'd like to make about your testimony or any of the questions that I've asked and your responses, or are you comfortable with what you've presented?
I'd just like to say that our mission is to save lives, and that's what we're doing. And we need assistance in being able to do that. I've been in the field, as I mentioned, for 22 years. And when I got into the field, you still had some of your old guard substance abuse treatment people who felt like you had to beat down the clients and make them feel really badly about themselves and heap more shame on them and then build them back up. Well, what we've learned through research is that that's exactly the opposite tack that we should take. People come into my facility and they are broken and they are desperate and they need help. And there is nothing more rewarding than when we have somebody come back to our facility after they've been discharged and they say, I have 90 days clean or I have a year clean. We're bringing families back together. We're allowing people to be re-engaged with their destinies, and that's why it's such a privilege to do what we do and to work with the population of people that we work with. And I want to thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you very much. Does any of the board or any of your professionals have any questions?
Yes.
Witness.
Mr. Sachs, I have a few questions for Mr. Dorshew. Mr. Dorshew, looking at A1, which is the comparison chart, it's your mission of operations, it says here, to improve the health and well-being for our residents. Where does that come from?
Where does that come from? That comes from our clinical, what's referred to as our clinical plan of service.
Okay.
That has been developed by the company.
All right, and you're claiming that that's the same mission that was for the approved use for Briarwood?
Yes.
Okay. All right, because correct me if I'm wrong, but I guess the mission statement for Recovery Centers of America, and again, tell me if I'm misinterpreting this, states that the Recovery Centers of America's mission is to save 1 million lives, one neighborhood at a time, creating treatment for addiction and mental health disorders that is as affordable and accessible as the treatment for other diseases. We strive to ensure that every patient receives the highest standard of clinical addiction treatment close to where they live and work.
Yes.
Okay, so that's your mission statement.
Mm-hmm.
That's not the mission statement of Briarwood, is it?
I don't believe it's a mission statement of Briarwood particularly.
In fact, it wouldn't be, because
Right,
Briarwood
it's
was
different,
not,
right.
Briarwood, the nursing home at Briarwood would not be, in fact, I don't even think they would be treating any addiction or rehabilitation, any addiction services, because that's not what they're geared for, that's not what they're planned for, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, I'd also ask you a question about the outpatient services, because I think you testified that 15% of your services are outpatient services. So tell me what the outpatient services entail, how many outpatients would be treated on a daily basis, because I'm assuming they'd be treated on a daily basis. Is that correct?
It depends on the level of care.
Okay.
So I mentioned under the outpatient services umbrella, I mentioned 3 levels of care. First is partial care.
Right.
That is 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, and that is for 6 hours a day.
Okay.
So the answer to your question for partial level of care is yes, they're there every day, 5 days a week.
Okay.
As they progress through the treatment continuum, they're stepping down then to intensive outpatient. Intensive outpatient includes a total of 10 hours of treatment per week, which is 3 3-hour groups, let's say Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then 1 individual session, which makes that 10th hour.
Okay.
Then they're progressing down to what the state refers to as general outpatient. General outpatient is our groups either twice or 1 time a week, and they're about an hour and a half. So you're down then to about 1.5 to 3 hours a week. Again, as you progress through the treatment continuum, and you are going through you're meeting your treatment care plan objectives, then the intensity of your treatment is decreasing as you move through it.
Okay. All right, so at the first level of outpatient, the most...
Partial.
The partial, we're talking 5 days a week. You could be coming 5 days a week?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Now, do you happen to know the proposed operations of Briarwood under the planning board approval from 2015?
I do not.
Okay. Well, I happen to have been the planning board attorney when that application was approved, so I'm familiar with it. If I were to tell you that there were no outpatient services at the nursing home, would that surprise you? Let's take it one step further. Do we generally have outpatient services at a long-term care facility or nursing home?
I don't believe so.
Yeah, in fact, we know that when you go to a nursing home or you go to a long-term care facility, you're usually there for some type of chronic disease, chronic illness, Alzheimer's. In fact, again, if you're not familiar with this particular approval for Briarwood, do you know for a fact whether or not there was an Alzheimer's unit in that approval?
In that approval, I do not.
Okay, all right. In your other facilities, and I know you just operate, you're the executive director for the facility in Mays Landing. Do you have an oncology nurse who's on staff 24/7?
We do not.
Okay. Do you have an orthopedics nurse who's on staff 24/7? Do you have a dialysis unit that's on? I didn't think so. All right. And by the way, I believe and I was very impressed with your presentation. I believe this is a service that's much needed in the community and the state. But what this board has to concentrate on are the distinctions between what your type of use is with what was approved at this particular site. All right, let me just go back to A1. Now, again, these are all services that you've testified to, which are similar. By the way, these services are all accessory services to the primary use of your business, which is for treatment for addiction.
Correct.
Okay. All right, but you've indicated on here 24-hour skilled nursing care, interdisciplinary care planning, 7 days a week therapy, social services, psychiatry, psychotherapy services, health management, including management of chronic illnesses, pain management, and diagnostic lab work. All right, so those are services that you're providing. Your contention is those are the same services that were being provided for Briarwood. Aren't those the same services, by the way, that would be offered by a large regional hospital?
I would imagine, yes.
Okay. I mean, I think we can take judicial notice of that fact. All right. Secondly, you have quality of life. It states here private and semi-private accommodations, comprehensive therapeutic recreation program, nutrition meals and snacks, beautician services, satellite TV and Wi-Fi, phone services, laundry services, resident-managed commissary, religious services for all denominations. Again, would those be the same services that might be offered by a large regional hospital located within the state of New Jersey?
Yes.
All right. And let's just go down to the last section, which is your clinical, the mission of operations, I guess, for a generic term, I guess every hospital is there to improve the health and well-being of their patients, certainly. And then going to the clinical staffing, you have licensed therapists, professional cooks, licensed nursing staff, on-staff physicians, social service professionals, and experienced administrative professionals. Again, I think you can concede that all of those are services that would be attendant to the operation of a large regional hospital within the state of New Jersey?
Right.
Okay. All right. All right. I don't have anything further, Mr. Chairman.
I have some questions. Are you going to have any teenagers involved in this?
We will not.
So a person 18 or older would be admitted?
Correct.
Can anyone leave your facility at any time?
Yes.
So, hypothetically speaking, someone at 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock at night could just turn around and say, I've had enough and I want to leave, and you would let them go?
Yeah. Yes, they're not, it's not a locked unit, and they are free to go.
When they come to your facility, is it voluntary, or is some of it mandated by a court or a hospital psychiatrist or psychologist?
It is voluntary.
Voluntary?
Yes. Now, some of our clients do have legal issues, but no judge is saying you have to go to, as my example, Lighthouse for treatment, and you have to be there on Tuesday. So.
I have a few more questions, but I'm going to yield to the board to ask any questions.
Yeah, I have a couple here, if I may. I guess this has more or less maybe to do with the site plan, which I don't know if we should be going into, but it seemed as if you're talking about a lot of people coming and going constantly there. And I know Briarwood, when they were up there, they always had a problem with parking. Are you going to be, I guess, will this be within the guidelines of our code for parking spaces too?
I defer to.
There, as you know, the original approval for Briarwood did include a proposed parking limitation. And it's my understanding that, and I think Mr. Cornell can corroborate this, but my understanding is that Briarwood has did file an application with the planning board to address that parking issue, and that application was not heard by the planning board pending a review by this board, because RCA has also filed an application for a use variance. So that issue that you've raised will be potentially heard if the use variance is prosecuted.
Yeah, let me just, there really are no site plan considerations this evening, all right? So I wouldn't, yeah, but if this, if Mr. Mashansky's decision is sustained, then the applicant has filed a use variance application where they will have to address site plan issues.
That's correct.
Mays Landing, is it, right?
Yes.
Is it comparable in size?
Mays Landing is currently 53 beds, and so it's currently smaller than the proposed use.
Right, you had how many? I'm sorry, I wrote it down.
149.
149 beds,
and
so
then
it's 3 times as big, okay.
Then we have started construction expansion,
Okay.
and at Mays Landing we'll be expanding to 135 beds.
Okay, to Mr. Emery's point, how many parking spaces do you currently have, just in case we see it later on? I mean, is this really even feasible that we can accommodate 149 beds at this point?
Are you speaking for Mays Landing?
Yeah, no, from Mays Landing, how many spots do you have
We
available?
have 70 parking spaces.
And how many do we have at Briarwood, do we know?
Mr. Chairman, the approved site plan contained 92 parking spaces. The application that was submitted to the board that Mr. Himmelman referred to was looking to increase it to 130 spaces.
Okay.
So they were looking to
So it
add more
looks like it'll-
spaces, but that has not been heard by the planning board.
No, of course, but it looks like the plans are, it looks like it'll accommodate the amount of beds that they have. If it's ever approved, it looks like they'll be able to accommodate. is
Well,
my point.
we would need to hear more testimony on
course, yeah.
staffing, and I mean, I'll raise the issue now. I mean, you're going to have outpatients coming to this facility as well, in addition to the inpatient residents. That's got to be more fully vetted out as well, so.
May I add to that point?
Sure.
We provide transportation.
Mhm.
So about 1/3 of our outpatients currently at Mays Landing, we pick them up and bring them. So
Mhm.
from a parking perspective, that's very favorable.
Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I have a question. Can you, sort of a question, just maybe a little bit more information. Can you talk more about the family services? What goes on there? What's kind of happening? How often? That type of thing.
We offer a family orientation program every Saturday and Sunday as well, and currently at Mays Landing on Monday night as well. Okay. So we are orienting the families to, as I mentioned, why is addiction a disease? What does treatment look like? What are appropriate boundaries that you're supposed to have with your loved one? Because the family members are confused and scared and angry and mistrusting and have been through the ringer. And so we're attempting to educate them about the disease of addiction and what treatment entails. So that is an orientation. We also offer a support group for families. And that's for people, whether they have loved ones in our facility or not. Members of the community are allowed to come as well, just for family support. So you might be familiar with Alcoholics Anonymous. You might have heard that term, or Narcotics Anonymous. There's also something called Al-Anon and Nar-Anon, which is for family members of addicts. We also offer, as I mentioned, family therapy by a licensed marriage and family therapist. So it's a wider, array to meet the needs of the families, because addiction is a family disease. The person leaving our facility is a lot of times returning home, and therefore the family needs to be educated on how to deal with that.
So these are regularly scheduled, or are they just ad hoc?
They are regularly scheduled.
Okay.
The
For about how long?
The orientations are actually an hour and a half on Saturday and Sunday, and about an hour and a half on Monday night. Very comprehensive.
And even for people that their family member might not even be in the facility yet, is that possible, or?
Family member might not be in the facility yet. Family member might have been discharged 6 months ago. We have a Monday night support group, and we have, and I facilitated that a couple Monday nights ago, and we have people who have been going to that support group for literally 6 and 7 years. So obviously their loved one's still not in treatment there, but they're receiving the support that they need.
Okay. And one other question, I was just wondering, you said that there was no interaction between the outpatient and the inpatient. Is there any reason for that, or just not practical, or?
It's not practical. It's not, we have to establish. We have to establish appropriate boundaries. It's not appropriate if someone steps down, excuse me, from our residential unit to our.
Want some water? Here, we have some water here. You've been talking for a long time.
Thank you. Excuse me. From our residential unit to our outpatient unit, and since they're in different groups and receiving different treatment, it's advised that they are separate.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Dorsey, I just have one follow-up for Mr. Kaczynski, and I may have been distracted and I didn't hear your answer.
Oh, yeah.
Did you state that family members could still be going to this site even though their loved one wasn't a patient in the facility?
Correct.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, just one last question. You talk about pain management. Is that something like for your back or something like, or what do you mean by pain?
We know that 4 out of every 5 heroin users start with opioid-based prescriptions. Prescription runs out, heroin is cheap, very readily available, so many times you have people who are developing an addiction as a result of pain issues. So as I said, our medical director at Mays Landing is certified in addiction medicine and works with people to manage the pain, not using narcotics or opioid-based painkillers.
So you could have someone that was in a car accident or something like that, and they have a problem with their back. Instead of taking drugs to help that, they would go to your facility and you would give them some other kind of prescription or some kind of other therapy?
Both, yes. We see now, and I didn't see it so much 10, 15 years ago, but we see now people, let's say they're in their 40s, who come into treatment, and this is becoming more and more common. I was in a work-related accident, I was in a car accident, and I developed, I had severe pain and developed this addiction. Never had addiction issues through high school, college years, 20s, but we're seeing more and more of that. So how do we manage that pain, not using those opioid-based painkillers?
Thank you.
Mr. Dorsey, as a follow-up to that question, though, the criteria for admission into your facility, however, would have to be that you have an addiction problem. Is that correct?
Correct, per our licensure.
All right. Right. So therefore, if Mr. Henry says, if I just happen to have had back surgery and I'm in pain, but I don't have an addiction problem, and I just need palliative care until I recover, would I be coming to your facility?
No, under our
didn't think so.
license, you don't.
Right.
You don't. Right.
Okay, thank you.
However, if you have developed an addiction.
Correct, then I would come.
That's what
Okay.
we're working with.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, I also have a question. Mr. Green asked you about the facility being open 24/7, correct? You also said the door is never locked.
Correct.
So anybody can come in, anybody can go out at any time. Is there any security to keep people from coming in when they're not supposed to, or go out when they're not supposed to?
Yes, yes. Our doors are locked as far as people coming in the overnight shift. Okay, we also have security cameras. Our employees have barcoded badges to gain entrance into the building. Any patient can walk, anyone can walk out, but for security reasons, you know, the doors are locked at 9 o'clock at night.
Okay,
As
so,
far as anybody, like coming in at 3 o'clock in the morning.
all right, but let's say even during the day, you know, somebody decides, I don't want to be here anymore, and they just want to walk out on their own. I guess they can just walk out, and nobody's going to stop them.
Yes, but what we do is we immediately, well, we attempt to, what we refer to as, you know, try to keep them, encourage them to stay in treatment. And we're very successful
But
with that.
sometimes it doesn't work.
Sometimes it does not work, yes. And so what we do, though, procedurally, is we follow up with those clients immediately to see, do you want to return to the facility? Can we maybe refer you to another facility? Because we
Okay.
want to see them remain in treatment.
But let's say they walk out and they just walk out into the street and they walk out into a neighborhood somewhere and they're wandering around. This person walked out and nobody followed them or stopped them.
Well, we would attempt to stop them.
You would attempt.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Can I follow up on that a little bit? Okay, so you have someone, if someone leaves, I'm gonna presume they're irate, they're unhappy, they're pissed off, right, I don't want this anymore, and they leave. Do you alert the police and say, look, we got someone wandering a nice neighborhood, you know, this is some expensive homes around there? You know, people don't want that. So would you alert the police to say, look, there's somebody walking around?
We alert the police if... Not good.
It's fine. It's fine, or...
We alert, testing my concentration.
There you go.
We alert the police if we feel like the client is in danger, you know, to do any type of harm to themselves.
So it's subjective?
So, well, it's clinically assessed, yes.
Okay, so if someone's mad,
Mhm.
wouldn't that constitute, look, he could possibly, or she, possibly do some damage to someone's property themselves, you know, walking around the neighborhood?
Yes, and I
So-
can tell you that in 13 months at Mays Landing, that's never occurred.
It's never occurred.
I mean, we have
But it
people
can.
who leave treatment, unfortunately, prematurely, but that's never occurred.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
Any other questions?
I have a,
Go.
In a nursing home situation, there are occasions where events occur, things come up that can't be handled in a nursing home. I don't know if you have the same kinds of situations, but
We do.
but I'd like to know what kind of situation would require outside help or whatever, and how often that occurs. And I realize your facility is right now smaller than, but just to get an idea of what kind of things happen and what the protocol is.
I'll put that in my answer into two categories. One category is occasionally, and this is not common, somebody might not be psychiatrically appropriate for our facility, so we will refer them to a facility that can better meet their clinical needs. Okay? Much more common, though, are folks with medical situations that we're not in a position to manage. So then we send them to the nearest hospital. As you can imagine, people who have, you know, many years of active addiction beat their bodies up pretty well, and it really takes a toll on their health. So yes, there are situations where we're referring out.
Any idea what the number might be on a quarter, half a year?
Maybe a couple of weeks.
Okay.
Now, many times they go to the hospital, they're medically cleared at the hospital, and then they come back. So if they're leaving, it doesn't mean they're leaving and not returning necessarily.
I have a question.
Any other questions?
Yes, to you, Larry.
Yeah.
I just need some clarification on what's being presented. I've got a good handle on the services that you provide. And I don't want to oversimplify this, but what we're being asked is to, I guess, differentiate between the services that were presented to the planning board, because we don't have any of that documentation, we weren't there, and then how our zoning official is interpreting it, correct?
Well, no, what you're being asked to interpret, not to interpret, you're being asked to decide whether or not Mr. Mashansky's decision not to issue a zoning permit to this applicant was the correct decision. Now, Mr. Mashansky's decision was that this facility is not a long-term care or nursing home facility, which was the approval for this particular use for the Briarwood site by the planning board.
Okay.
You've heard testimony, and you'll have to make your decision based on that.
Okay.
And the only thing I would add to Mr. Sachs is that I think, and Mr. Mashansky could correct me if he thinks I'm wrong, but I think he was relying also on the definition that
Yes.
we've been referring to all evening on long-term care facility and nursing care facilities. Included in that is a description of services and treatment and staffing, et cetera, that we've been alluding to, which is why we're spending some time going over the RCA proposed use versus what was previously approved. So that gives you the context. But we're not asking the board to go back and look at conditions of the site plan from Briarwood. We're basically saying that was that particular approval was permitted as of right in the prime zone, as of right. So, and we're demonstrating, we hope, that the services between the two facilities are the same. And that's why we're going through this exercise.
So, right now, there's nobody there. It's barren, correct?
Correct.
So do we have any potential tenants coming in at some point in time? I mean,
Well,
why would we not want
No.
business in there?
We may want, right, this is a use that,
Tax.
if it's, well, first of all, if Mr. Himmelman's application is successful
Yeah.
tonight, then he will be issued a zoning permit, and he can go forward with this use.
Right.
If you determine that Mr. Mashansky was correct, and that maybe it quacks like a duck, maybe it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, but it's not a duck, it's really a goose, and comparing the two uses,
True.
then Mr. Himmelman's client has already done that. He's filed the use variance application, and this board will hear the proofs that are necessary to sustain getting a use variance. Now, I will note that this is a use that is an inherently beneficial use. So if, in fact, it does ultimately go to a hearing on a use variance, it's a use that is, it's a use where the applicant doesn't have to prove the positive criteria. It's already proven. There are certain uses in New Jersey that we know are inherently beneficial uses. So then it's just a question of dealing with the negative criteria and dealing with the site plan issues.
I mean, personally, I think it's a stretch. The parallels are
Well,
a stretch.
listen, that's,
However,
but
why would we not want another business in here?
Well, at the end of the day, yes, we probably want another business in
Right.
there, and we probably want another.
good business,
And
for
a
that
good
matter.
business, and a business that serves the community.
Right.
But we're dealing with the municipal land use law, which is very specific, and we're dealing with the burden of proof that the applicant has with respect to this. Mr. Chairman, maybe we should take a 5-minute recess if we're done with this witness?
That's fine with me, Mr. Chairman. That's up to you.
We're going to call for a 5-minute recess.
Okay, thank you.
Go sit over here.